I would just add useful data. That we talk about capturing all this data, all this information, dark data, and how do we make it useful to advertisers or to people that are not technical to help better their lives or making better decisions. I think to follow up on one of the earlier points you brought up on privacy, I think that is, as I look at small companies today that are building solutions for web users, privacy is a very big concern. There's I don't know if you guys get any time, but there's an interesting documentary. It's called Terms and Conditions May Apply. I recommend as a homework assignment you go download that movie and check it out. But I think this is something that will be a big issue as we talk about big data, NSA, people, consumers getting more concerned about what kind of profile are you building. I think as a consumer, you're fine with an exchange of if I get great content or will I get a better purchasing, will I get a better user experience, I'm fine with giving up information, but how deep do you want to go? So privacy is a big issue. Okay, so let's continue with that idea, privacy. Will communities request to make data much more secure? Will they request, in your think, it's maybe not really a technology question, it's more a social question, but is there going to be a major change as the way to the public looks at all this data and how the NSA and other agencies are working with that? Is going to be, or just people are going to say, I don't care, whatever? No, sort of the same as now.
I think there will be a major change. I think it's coming from two places. One is government surveillance, as we've seen, but I think the other is as companies like Google and Facebook and others begin to essentially use the content that we provide as part of an advertising or a marketing solution, and as they mine more data about us and use that in both aggregate and personal ways, I think you are going to begin to see people say, wait, is that really a trade that I want to make? I think right now it's too ephemeral and people are just saying, well, if I click this button, I'll get this thing in the short term and that's what I want. And so they do that. But I don't think that's going to last forever. I think people are going to get much more focused. Doesn't mean they'll make a different decision at the end, but I think they're going to get much more focused on this.
I agree with that. I think this is a very interesting point in time if we talk about the social media era. In the US, there's a discussion right now whether it's coming to an end or it's actually the beginning. And the reason why the discussion is there is obviously because we've now seen LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube by Google, and now Twitter doing the IPO. And all of these people and companies are now driven in a public place, which means that, of course, they're accountable to their shareholders. And as they become accountable to shareholders, over time, the shareholders want a return. And what does that look like? It potentially means exploiting data. It definitely means more advertising. And I think as we go down that path and that route, it's going to be very interesting to see whether they can stay on that thin red line and keep it in a way that is not pushing away consumers. And obviously the privacy issues really kicks in here because as we already talked about, I think often what you see is that over a period of time you go to one extreme and then the pendulum starts to swing back. And I think at this point in time I do think we're at one extreme. I do think it's very extreme that you upload things to Facebook and Facebook owns everything that is on that platform. That is very extreme, and I think that pendulum will swing back, and at the same time we're hit with social company that needs to make a profit.
Maybe one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually one comment. I actually agree with what I think Jonathan said earlier, that the next maybe 5 to 10 years are going to be critical to understand if we are going for privacy or we're not going for privacy. There is this notion that I heard from several people that the young generation doesn't care about privacy. They're on Facebook, they share everything that they want to share, they share almost everything they have. And another claim is that it's true, but there are things that they will never share. And definitely when they grow up, they're not going to share. I think within the next 5 to 10 years, we'll know the answer to that. My bet is that we are too long ahead or farther ahead to go back from and have everyone have their own privacy on whatever they want. But that's just my own thinking about it. But it's definitely a question that we'll need to answer.
I just wanted to make one more point. About big data, not from the privacy perspective, but from the commercial perspective. It's been amazing to me to watch how much money is being thrown at any company that says they're in the big data business. And basically everyone is now saying we're in the big data business. The truth right now is that big data is still pretty bad. The data that actually exists is still not anywhere near the algorithmic power that exists in order to mine it and analyze it. You even had a company like Axiom, which is one of the companies that for years collected more personal data than just about anybody about Americans. And they recently did a campaign where they said, you can go onto our site and look at the data that we have about you. And it was fascinating because they had never allowed this in the past. And in fact, they had made it extremely difficult for you to opt out of their databases and get your data expunged from them. And here suddenly they were allowing you to do this. And the reason was because the data was actually incorrect in many, many cases. And your natural instinct when you went online was to say, oh, that's wrong, I'm going to correct it now. And suddenly you were giving them the fact that you were actually a teacher and not a doctor, or something like that. And so even a company like that actually had to use the user in order to get their data to be up to speed. I think we have a ways to go. Big data is becoming an overused term. I think it will be big business, and for some companies it is already. But it's got a lot of hype to it right now.
So maybe I can just focus the question. You mentioned Axiom and obviously big data and the cloud and the social crowding. I want to ask you, since there are 3 journalists in the panel, at least part of their career, how do you think media would look like in 10 years? Who will supply the news? Who will supply the media? Is it all going to be pretty much like it's today, with the incumbents doing the bulk of the work? Or most of it is going to come from all over the place, from social networks? Yeah, but you wanted to say something first.
I can start with that, yes. I have left the business, so
all right.
But I really hope that we're going to have, also in the future, well-paid journalists which do 3 things: select, structure, and give some value to information, more than the normal reader can. So I don't think that we will survive in information society with a completely free model.
Jimmy, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, of course. I have an opinion about that, since we're one of the companies disrupting that area.
You should.
And I think there's no doubt we're in this middle of this paradigm shift, and it's never going to go back to what it was. I think there's people that think that eventually the pendulum will move back, but the thing is, technology has empowered people. Technology has democratized media, and people want to have a voice. And I think that's one of the things. The other thing that technology has done is that it's increased the pace of the news cycle. So as an example, 5 years ago we did 200 news outputs on a daily basis. Now we do 1,600. It's not because we want to do 1,600. It would be much more economical to do 200. But if we are not doing 1,600, we are not feeding the news-hungry audience. And the point I'm trying to make here is that we can't produce 1,600 news outputs on our own and make a profitable, viable business. It's just not possible. So I have to believe in crowdsourcing. I have to believe in inviting the community in and taking part in the content creation. The journalists, we have around 800 journalists, so it's not that I don't believe in journalism. I do believe in journalism, but it's just the model has changed, and we need to accept that it's changing, and that's at least what I believe. We also do need to see that over time that people want to pay for news. I think right now it's a very difficult situation for a lot of the traditional players. They put paywalls around their content, and it's not really working at scale. And that said, I do think there's enough people out there that wants to pay for news, because if not, the ad-funded model cannot pay for the whole ecosystem, and the quality of the news will be very, very low. So we need the New York Times, the Wall Street Journals, the Guardians. We need those guys to survive, but they need to get the model right. And I do think in the news industry, I'm living from an ad-funded model, but the traditional players obviously need to kind of get to a point where they create a more sophisticated model that's much more a la carte and much more, I think we're looking for something like when iTunes entered into music, right? Before iTunes went into music, 90% of all music was downloaded for free. It's the same in news right now. Then iTunes came in, and what they did different, apart from the technology, was that suddenly the music industry was interested in selling one track instead of the CD. And I think that's the model we need to get into for news. Then I think people will slowly get used to it, and they will pay for news.
But I have a follow-on question to you. With all the technology, your news is going to be very privatized in the sense of it's going to give you what you want. It's the filter bubble thing. Do you think that at the end of the day, people will find themselves with just a very narrow set of information that they want? Maybe basic stuff, gossip, whatever, and because the system is bringing them only what they want, having analyzed what they want, they'll miss the bigger picture of what's happening in the world and the big topics.
I think that is definitely one of the concerns and problems you can have with that model, but I do think if we look at what people, if you kind of analyze it, on average they have 10-15 minutes to kind of consume news on a daily basis. And if that's what you have, then you don't have time for the long form, for the investigative things. I'm not saying we shouldn't do those pieces, but then we need to think about when are we bringing those pieces, because over the weekend you have more time. So I'm just saying the way we used to do news, over the week, at least is what I'm seeing from the trends and from the data, is that you just want to be updated. You want to know what's going on. And then when you have more time, you dwell in, and that's also where I think that you can charge more for the in-depth, for the analysis, for the background. So I do think that it's twofold. I don't think it's one or the other. I do think we need both, and I do think, as I said, I do think there's enough people that want to kind of do more than just surf on the surface. But I do think that general interest news is not something that we will be able to charge for. There's just too much free out there, and it's very easy to create. So it's the long form, it's the investigative, it's kind of the behind the scenes things. I think that is where we will, as news organization, will be able to charge enough readers out there.
Let me just add one short thing. It's the same with privacy. I don't believe that we're going to find a technology solution for these questions. I think in terms of privacy and in terms of which media we want to have in the future, we need a debate in society, and we need a new consensus on these questions.
I don't think there's any doubt that the traditional models have been upended and disrupted. That's already happened. We have a fairly successful blended model of both advertising and paid content, but it's not perfect, and we're working on it every day. I think one interesting thing about models like the Huffington Post versus ours is that it may be an ironic end, because at the end of the day, I'm not sure the value of any destination site is going to matter. And that's really how sites that operate on the free model monetize at the maximum. But when technology continues to push us in the direction that I think Twitter is, where essentially everyone will have their own personalized news service, and you will receive a feed that you've designed that will reflect your reading interests, your reading habits, and most importantly, where you find the most quality of news. And then I think we're going to see another upheaval, because traditionally free sites like BuzzFeed and Mashable that rely on people going to their destinations and clicking multiple times, then they begin to get disrupted as well. So it's going to be an interesting cycle, and I wish I knew the answer, and I wish I knew when it would happen relative to my retirement date.
I was just going to add that that I agree. I think Twitter is a great source for news. I find it myself searching on Twitter to, if I've heard something and can't validate it in the regular news, I go to Twitter and find that. And all.
Let's try this. Who uses Twitter as a news source more than anything else? Just show of hands. 30%. That's
we're the bleeding edge.
That's not
we're
bad.
Starting it.
Same for me.
Yeah, and so that's a great source. I think when Jimmy talks about just the number of stories that are that they're publishing, I think of a lot of my life is spent on kind of pop culture, on seeing what people are searching on, what are the newest crazes and the fads, and the explosion of celebrity media and TMZ, which is a popular site in the United States for celebrity news. Watching people walk through the airport is a piece of content that people like to watch, and so I think you're starting to see more and more things that are being reported, and I think people are looking for stories that aren't so doom and gloom like the normal media. If you ever watch the 6 o'clock news, it's quite uplifting.
Gloom sells. I'm a journalist, I can tell you that. I want to go to prediction number 2 by Gartner. The fact that the coming system in the next few years are going to make quite a few professions, maybe even white-collar profession, obsolete because the system does it cheaper and maybe better. Which professions do you think are going to be hit, have less employment? Do you have a feeling about that? Theoretically, I don't know. Anybody who's doing anything on a desk more or less repetitively is in danger.
You mean besides journalists, or?
Besides journalists, that's and they're doomed. That's it.
It's all over. Not sure this is working again. Look, I don't know if I could pick a particular profession. I think industries have a way of responding very quickly to disruption. On the other hand, there are industries like travel agents that, they just really never were able to recover. I think there's a different way to look at that question. I'll just throw it out there. Disruptive technology is very exciting. That's why there are meetings like this, and everyone gets tremendously energized by the kind of disruption that's possible. It also tends to create a great deal of wealth in a short amount of time for a small number of people. But I think what we're seeing in the United States, and I think we're seeing it elsewhere in the world as well, is that is contributing to an acceleration of economic stratification. So whether we know exactly which professions are going to be affected or not, I think is less the question than a very real reality now that we have ever increasing gaps between the extremely wealthy and everyone else. And what is really going to be fascinating to see is how society deals with that, and whether there are actual technological solutions that emerge that perhaps address it for people.
Anybody else on that? No? Okay. Yeah.